Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light? Jenny was in her first year of college. She shared a room with her roommate, Valerie, and they were really good friends. One night, Jenny asked Valerie if she wanted to go out and party with her and Jenny's boyfriend, Nick. No, she said. It's okay, I need to study for the big test tomorrow. Suit yourself, said Jenny, and she left the room. She later met Nick at the bar nearby and they had a great time. When the bar closed, they returned to Jenny's dorm. When they got there, they saw Valerie's shoes next to these big black boots. They also heard giggling and all the lights were out. There was a curtain to separate the living room and Valerie's bedroom. Jenny and Nick decided they would leave Valerie and her mystery man alone for the night, and they would stay in the living room. So they did. The next morning the curtain was still up, but the black boots were gone. Jenny was the only one awake and making breakfast. She woke up Nick and brought him a glass of juice, but she tripped and the glass fell. Jenny thought she woke up Valerie. She called, "Val, are you awake?" But there was no answer. She called again. Still no answer. "Val, this isn't funny," she said. Jenny then got worried and pulled the curtain aside and screamed. Valerie was in her room, tied to her bed, with her throat cut open. There was blood everywhere, and in blood there was a note for Jenny and Nick saying, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?"
Blue Eyes. There once were two sisters named Sarah and Jennifer. Sarah, who was the older sister, was very beautiful with long golden hair and big, vibrant blue eyes. She was the envy of every other girl in school, but Sarah's gifts did not end there. She was also very athletic and very intelligent. Sarah would always come home with straight A's and academic rewards, and this year she was made captain of the cheerleading squad at school. Most people would say that Sarah was perfect in every way. There was one person, however, who did not feel that Sarah was so perfect. Sarah's sister Jennifer despised her, hated her, loathed her with a passion. Her older sister was a constant reminder of everything that Jennifer could never be. "You are lazy and stupid," her parents would say. "Your grades are terrible and you need to lose weight. Why can't you be more like your sister?" Oh, how she hated being compared to her sister. How she hated her lovely face and her golden hair. She hated her intelligence and her athleticism. She hated everything about her. But what Jennifer hated more than anything, what she simply could not stand, were Sarah's eyes. Oh, those wonderfully blue eyes, always looking down at her, always taunting her. How dare she have such eyes? Without those eyes, you would be nothing. Those eyes, oh, those eyes, curse them. Curse you and those eyes. It was then that Jennifer decided she would get back at her sister for all those years of torment she had caused. "Without those eyes, you are nothing," she repeated to herself. "You are nothing without those eyes." The next day, Sarah waited for Jennifer outside the school for over half an hour, but she never showed up. Maybe she's ill and did not come to school today, she thought. When Sarah got home, she called for her sister, but there was no answer. She checked Jennifer's room, but she wasn't there. Where could she be? Sarah thought. Later that evening, Sarah's boyfriend called saying that he would pick her up in 15 minutes for their date. "I'm very sorry," she said, "but my sister Jennifer is not home, and I need to stay here in case she comes back. I'm very worried about her." When another hour passed and Jennifer still did not come home, Sarah decided to go look for her. She left a note for their parents and stepped out the back door into the yard. She took a few steps and then froze in utter horror. There, hanging from a tree, was her sister Jennifer. She had sliced herself open, the knife still clutched in her hand. Blood poured down over her shirt and jeans, and her face shone a look of complete agony. Sarah screamed hysterically at the gruesome sight. She fell to her knees and screamed, and screamed, and screamed until her lungs were about to burst. Although she tried, she could not look away. Her eyes were frozen open on the grisly sight. Finally, Sarah could stand it no more, and she clutched at her eyes and tore them from her skull.
What do you come for? There was an old woman who lived all by herself, and she was very lonely. Sitting in the kitchen one night, she said, "Oh, I wish I had some company." No sooner had she spoken than down the chimney tumbled 2 feet, from which the flesh had rotted. The old woman's eyes bulged with terror. Then 2 legs dropped to the hearth and attached themselves to the feet. Then a body tumbled down. Then 2 arms and a man's head. As the old woman watched, the parts came together into a great gangling man. The man danced around and around the room. Faster and faster he went. Then he stopped, and he looked into her eyes. "What do you come for?" she asked in a small voice that shivered and shook. "What do I come for?" he said. "I come for you!"
"Daddy, Daddy," erupted Cindy. "A garage sale! And look, they have toys!" Travis rolled his eyes. "Don't you have enough toys by now?" "Mommy says I outgrow them," she responded. "And plus, when I get new toys, Mommy gives the old ones to poor kids that don't have any." "Of course that bitch does," thought Travis. "Why not give away all the toys Dad buys?" Just fewer reminders of him left in the house. "Please!" Travis peered into the rearview mirror, studying his 5-year-old daughter in the car seat. Hell, it wasn't her fault that her mother was heartless and self-serving. And he couldn't say no to this little girl smiling, with her very first baby tooth missing. He slowed his Toyota Camry and veered to the curb. "Yay!" Cindy celebrated. "I love garage sales!" "More than Toys R Us?" "Daddy," she explained, as only a 5-year-old can. "Garage sales are a lot cheaper. You should be happier." Travis could not help laughing out loud. "Well, honey, you're absolutely right." Bless her heart, already understanding the value of money. He was a proud papa. The yard was cluttered with baby furniture, various tools, a scraped-up bike, and a rocking chair. Travis brought his daughter through the maze, glancing at all the offerings. They made their way to the driveway, which was thick with folding tables and crates filled with old records, paperback books, dishes, clothes, and toys. While Travis paused to look at the books, little Cindy made straight for the crate of used toys. The old stuffed animals caught her attention immediately. One was a stuffed white puppy, a husky, cute as can be. The other was a soft brown teddy bear. The bear looked very old, with ratty fur and torn ears. But something about the way that it was positioned, facing the 5-year-old just so, made him pathetically irresistible to Cindy. She picked them both up, hugging them to her. "Looks like someone found a friend," said a voice, and Cindy turned around, and an elderly black woman with silvering hair was smiling down at the little girl. "Hello, sweetie, I'm Emma. Welcome to my garage sale." "Hi," Cindy responded politely. Find something you like? Asked Travis, arriving with a small handful of tattered paperback books. Cindy held the stuffed animal. Oh yes, Daddy! Aren't they adorable? Adorable, huh? Noted Travis. Probably a word that she picked up from her mother describing the gifts given by her new boyfriend. I can't make up my mind which one I want, though. Why not take both? Travis suggested, turning to the old woman. How much for the critters? Emma squinted. Well now, Barry's old puppy is $1, but I don't remember having that teddy bear. She thought hard, sure that no children had been by that could have left it there. And finally, she shrugged and said, I'll tell you what, you buy that puppy, for $1.50, you can have the bear too. Sold, ma'am, said Travis, and these books too. In the car, Cindy talked to her new pets. She was explaining to them how they had to behave at Daddy's place, and then, after the weekend, they would be going home with her to Mommy's house. Travis curled his upper lip at the mention of Mommy. They arrived at Travis's humble suburban condo. Cindy grabbed her jacket and the stuffed animals while Travis lugged her weekend suitcase up the path to his building. He unlocked the door, and little Cindy trotted to her bedroom ahead of him. Travis followed to help her unpack and get settled. When her things were laid out, Cindy joined her father in the kitchen. He was putting together dinner, which she always enjoyed helping him with. And after they ate, she returned to her room while Travis rinsed the pots and pans. Once the dishes were loaded and running, Travis wandered down the hallway to join his daughter. He turned the corner to her bedroom and found her sitting on the floor with the teddy bear, staring into the bear's eyes. She was absolutely mesmerized. Travis chuckled at the sight. You really like that old thing, huh? Cindy snapped to attention. Oh, hi, Daddy. Playing with your new friends? The puppy's tired, so he's taking a nap now. I don't know his name yet. She held up the bear. But this is Teddy. And Teddy, this is Daddy. Travis leaned down, hands on his cheeks. Hello, little guy. Let him smell you, Daddy, Cindy instructed. That's what animals do. Okay, said Travis, playing along. He stretched his right hand out to the teddy bear. Here you go, boy. Cindy manipulated its head to simulate sniffing on her father's hand. The stuffed animal's nose was cold. Travis recoiled instinctively. He could swear the black button was wet. Whoa, he exclaimed. His nose is cold. No, Daddy, Cindy giggled. You're funny. Come on, urged Travis. What do you say we play a little Xbox before bed? And the child agreed, following her father to the living room for some video game fun. And after a bit, it was time for Cindy to get ready for bed. Travis told her to brush her teeth and get her jammies on, and he gave her a few minutes to do so. Then he headed down to the hallway to tuck her in and say goodnight. Before he got to her room, he heard a low, gravelly growl. Travis stopped for a second and then realized his daughter was playing with her new teddy bear. Smiling, he continued to her room, and sure enough, she was sitting on the bed with the bear. Ready for bed? Travis asked. Uh-huh. He put her under the covers, placing the bear on the pillow next to her. Have a good sleep, he said. Tomorrow we'll go do some fun stuff. Cindy gave him a hug, and he turned the light off. Then he headed down the hallway to watch some TV. Travis spent the next hour or two having a couple of quiet beers on the couch while catching up on some sports highlights. And then he turned everything off, locked up the apartment. After checking in on Cindy, he trudged to bed. It didn't take long for Travis to succumb to the drift of sleep. His dreams were normal at first. Some of being at work without pants, some of four-wheel driving, some of willing women. But then there was a sense of dread that filtered into his dreams like some invisible monster was coming from him. He could almost hear it sniffing the air for his scent. The dread grew heavy and desperate as he realized the monster was almost upon him. Travis awoke. He took a moment to adjust to his surroundings, finally realizing that he was safe in bed. Shaking his head as if to clear it like an Etch-a-Sketch, he closed his eyes to go back to sleep. And then he heard sniffing in the dark. It sounded like it was at the foot of his bed. He opened his eyes. Was that really sniffing that he heard? Was that what infiltrated his dreams and woke him up? Of course not, he reasoned. Don't be ridiculous. Surely the dream was still in his mind, making him think that he was hearing things. He slept again. He was awoken again several hours later. This time it was not a sniffing sound, but a rather distinct growl. It was soft and quiet, but it jolted him nonetheless. Travis sat up and rubbed his eyes, fumbling for the switch on his nightstand. He turned the light on and scanned the room with nervous eyes. Nothing out of the ordinary was visible in the low light. He slid out of bed and walked to his doorway, eyes darting everywhere, and he reached his bedroom doorway. He saw a light on in the hallway bathroom. And then Cindy flipped the light off and shuffled back to her bed. Travis smiled, silencing a chuckle. Only a kid, he noted, would have the imagination to make noises for their stuffed animals, even when they're half asleep. He returned to his bed. The next morning was bright and sunny. When Cindy woke, she got her father up and stated that she was hungry. Travis waltzed into the kitchen with her, where he started coffee and pulled out milk and cereal. By the time his coffee was done brewing, little Cindy was pouring her second bowl of Cheerios, eating like a hungry bear, he observed. Do the bear growls again, smiled Travis. I like that. Cindy frowned. What bear growls? You know, the ones you made last night in your room when you were playing with the bear. That wasn't me, shrugged Cindy. That was Teddy. He's a grumpy old bear. He was mad when I told him that we had to go to sleep. I guess he wanted to stay up longer. Travis rolled his eyes. Well, finish up your breakfast. We have a long, fun day ahead of us. The two did have a full day. Travis took his daughter to the zoo, then to lunch, then to the movies to see the last animated kids feature, and then to their favorite park for a walk and talk around the sleepy lake. By the time they returned to Travis's apartment with their dinner, it was almost 6 o'clock. Travis unlocked the door with one hand while gripping the bag of Burger King with the other. He opened the door, and the two of them spilled inside. The bear was sitting upright in the middle of the floor, almost appearing like it had been waiting impatiently. Hi, Teddy, gleamed Cindy. Were you a good boy while we were gone? Teddy simply sat, innocently, staring at the little girl. Go put him in the bedroom, honey, Travis instructed. We don't want to trip over him, and go wash your hands for dinner. Cindy did so. They ate their burgers and fries, washing them down with the soothing cold of their vanilla milkshakes. Then it was time for a movie while they digested, and Cindy picked out her usual Disney DVD. After the animated movie, it was Cindy's bedtime. Travis directed her to her room to change into her jammies and brush her teeth. She reluctantly complied. 10 minutes later, Travis wandered into Cindy's room to tuck her in. He found her on the carpeted floor playing with the teddy bear again. But the cute stuffed husky was nowhere in sight. What happened to your puppy? Cindy lowered her head. Teddy gobbled him up. Uh-huh, said Travis. Well, you need to go to sleep, honey. It's past your bedtime. He helped her into bed, kissed her forehead, and said goodnight. Then he flicked the light off and returned to the living room for a couple of hours of ESPN. By 11, Travis was drowsy. It had been a full, tiring day with his daughter, and he had now hit a wall, realizing that he could barely keep his eyes open. He turned the TV off and sauntered to bed. He awoke hours later to the distant sound of sniffing. Taking a moment to gather his senses, Travis sat up in bed and turned on the nightstand lamp. His eyes quickly focused and saw nobody else in the room with him. But then, soft and subtle, he heard the noise coming from the hallway. Damn kid, he thought. She should be sleeping instead of playing around. Half agitated, Travis got out of bed and headed to the hallway. He stopped at the doorway. Something moved in the gloom of the hallway, and he had to pause to see what it was. It must be Cindy, his mind told him. But what slight images his eyes could pull from the darkness were not that of a little girl. He strained his eyes, trying to identify the moving object before taking a few more steps into the hallway to reach the light switch. His eyes adjusted further. He saw what looked like something very small, crawling in the dark, slow and smooth. but it was too small to be Cindy. It was almost the size of a cat, creeping ever so slowly towards him. He thought he could almost make out the yellow glow of tiny eyes. His pulse quickened. Travis moved further into the hallway and nervously flipped the light switch on. The brightness stung his eyes for a second, and then he scanned the hallway and saw Cindy's ratty little teddy bear lying face down on the carpet. What the hell? He wondered, questioning his eyes. Nothing was in the hallway except for that old bear. I must be half asleep, he surrendered, shaking his head. He picked up the stuffed animal and returned it to his daughter's room and went back to bed. Half an hour went by before Travis was snapped awake yet again, a noise coming from down the hall, just unusual enough to pull him from his slumber. Was that a groan or a growl? He waited to hear it again. Now he heard a continuous growling, quiet but deep. Enough is enough, he fumed. Travis, fed up with his sleep being interrupted, swung his legs over the mattress and marched up the hallway. The sound was definitely coming from Cindy's room, as he expected. He was prepared to be stern, to be demanding, but by the time he got to Cindy's room and flicked the light on, what he saw made him pause in puzzled silence. Little Cindy was awake, although not in the true sense of the word. She was sitting up in her bed, frozen still, staring at the teddy bear with lifeless, unblinking eyes. The low growl was not coming from her mouth, it emanated from the stuffed bear, sitting in front of her on the bed. Then he saw something that jolted him. The bear's head quickly turned to face Travis. Travis did not know what to do. Was he really seeing what he thought he was seeing? Before his brain could prompt him to take any action, however, his attention was drawn to the bear's eyes. The black eyes began to glow bright red, gradually at first, then growing in intensity. Travis was captured by the hypnotic glow, and he suddenly found himself paralyzed like his daughter. The spectator, now helplessly secured, the stuffed bear turned its attention back to the little girl. The hint of a smile curled up its lips, separating the stitching of its tiny mouth. What happened next was the most terrifying thing that Travis could ever be forced to witness. The bear's furry maw opened, wider and wider and wider, unnaturally wide. Its jaws stretched outward, lower jaw on the bedspread, upper jaw at Cindy's face. The teeth appeared, sharp and huge, the size of something that could have never been there before. Frozen, Travis could only watch in horror as the bear leaned forward and began to devour little Cindy. The girl's head disappeared first into the gnashing teeth, followed by her frail shoulders, ribs, torso, hips, and spindling legs until she was gone. All gone, save for a small amount of blood that managed to spill out onto the bedspread. Somehow Travis was able to break free from his paralysis. He crumpled to the floor, drew every ounce of strength that he could muster, and urgently began to crawl away into the hallway. His arms and legs were barely movable, but he managed to will them to carry him across the long stretch of carpet back to his bedroom. He was still in shock, numbed by the inconceivable thing that he had just seen. It was a surreal blur. And eventually, Travis found his way inside of his bedroom closet. He shakily shut the doors and shrank behind into the confining darkness. Shuddering, he held his knees tight against his chest. He had become a frightened, helpless child, reduced to a feeble, quivering mass awaiting his fate. It didn't take long before Travis heard noisy, hungry sniffing at the closet door.
My dad's friend, Charlie Potter, was a small, nervous man who was always looking around as if he was in some kind of danger. After he told me this story about his college fraternity, I understood why. The frat doesn't exist anymore, he said. It was banned years ago. We had just 9 members at that point, and we're taking in 2 more, Jack Lawton and Ernie Kramer. One night, in January, just about this time of year. The 9 of us took them out into the country for their initiation. We took them to an old deserted house where 2 young men about our age had been murdered recently. Their murderer was still at large. We gave Jack a lighted candle and told him to go up to the 3rd floor. Stay there for an hour, we told him. Then come back down. Don't speak, don't make any noise. If your candle goes out, carry on in the dark. From where we were standing, we could see the light from Jack's candle moving up the stairs to the 2nd floor, then to the 3rd. When he got to the 3rd floor, his candle went out. We guessed that he had come to a drafty corner, and the wind blew it out. But when the hour went by, and he didn't come down, we weren't so sure. We waited another 15 minutes and got more and more nervous. So we sent Ernie Kramer up after him. When Ernie got to the 3rd floor, his candle also went out. We waited 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but there was no sign of either of them. Come on down, we called, but they didn't answer. Finally, we decided to go and get them. Armed with flashlights, we started up the stairs. It was as quiet and as dark as a grave in that house. When we got to the 2nd floor, we called out again, but there was no answer. When we got to the 3rd floor, we walked into a great big open space like an attic. Jack and Ernie weren't there, but we saw footprints in the dust. These led to a room on the other side of the attic. The room was also empty, but there was fresh blood on the floor, and the window was wide open. It was about 25 feet to the ground, but there was no ladder or rope in sight that they could have used to get down. We searched the rest of the house and the land around the house and found nothing. We decided that they were playing a trick on us. We figured that in some way they had escaped through the window and were hiding in the woods. The blood on the floor was to throw us off the track. We guessed that they'd show up the next day with a lot of stories and a lot of laughs. But they didn't. The next day, we told the Dean of Men what had happened, and he reported it to the police. The police didn't find anything either, and after several weeks, the search ended. To this day, no one knows what happened to Jock Lawton and Ernie Kramer. There isn't much more to tell, he said. We weren't arrested, but the college disbanded the fraternity and suspended the 9 of us from school for a year. The strangest part came after we graduated. Someone must have placed a curse on us. Every year, since then, around the time of that initiation, one of us has died or gone crazy. I'm the only one left, he said, and I'm in pretty good health. But there are times when I feel just a little peculiar.
The 13 Tom and Jerry shorts, made by the Czechoslovakian director Gene Deitch, are infamous for their poor quality and rather disturbing nature, featuring badly done sound effects and animation, and having a more realistic feel to the violence. Some have speculated that Deitch didn't like the concept behind Tom and Jerry, and was pressured into making them, and wanted to make the people who watched his take on it feel bad for liking the concept. What many people don't know is that Deitch was originally signed on to make more than the 13 episodes the public has access to. Desperate to get out of his contract, Deitch made one more Tom and Jerry short that few have ever seen. The short was called Tom's Basement. It opened with Tom in a typical Tom and Jerry house. His owner was the fat, angry guy from the other Deitch shorts. Tom's owner seemed even angrier than his other appearances. The first scene is him stomping on Tom's tail in a very realistic and painful-looking way because Tom is sleeping by the basement door. The owner yells at Tom to never go down there again. Tom is clearly terrified and runs away to another room. Our view stays in the room by the basement door, and we see Jerry come out of a mouse hole. He looks truly grotesque, far more off-model than the other Deej shorts. He gets an evil look on his face and follows Tom into the next room. The next few minutes are fairly formulaic. Jerry repeatedly managed to trick Tom into chasing him to the basement door a few times, but each time the owner catches Tom, he inflicts a painful-looking injury on him, which stays with Tom even after the scene ends. After 3 beatings, Tom is bruised all over, bleeding in a few places, and limping on a broken leg. After this, Tom starts to literally beg Jerry not to bother him anymore. He's not really talking, but his crying and mumbling, you could tell what he's doing by his body language. Jerry just laughs at him and pushes him back to the basement door. The owner catches Tom again and goes ballistic. The camera zooms in on his face. It changes color and distorts as he yells at Tom in a much louder voice than any other sound in the cartoon. I can't post most of what he says on here, but it's definitely vicious and furious. It seems like Jerry has finally decided to take pity on Tom, though. Jerry picks up a knife that was laying around and stabs the owner in the leg quite graphically. Tom opens the basement door and they can hear the owner's body fall down the stairs. There are dozens of other bodies down there decaying and showing signs of their violent deaths. Tom and Jerry shake hands, and it seems like they've triumphed over the serial killer. But Jerry gets an evil look on his face again, and Tom says in that ghostly deep voice, Jerry stabs Tom, killing him, and throws his body into the pile. The last shot is Jerry, putting up a for sale sign on the yard, laughing, clearly planning to do it all over again.
It's him. The woman was the meanest, most miserable person you could imagine. And her husband was just as bad. The only good thing was that they lived in the woods all by themselves and couldn't bother anybody else. One day, they were off somewhere getting firewood, and the woman got so mad at her husband that she grabbed an axe and cut his head off, just like that. Then she buried him nice and neat and went home. She made herself a cup of tea and went out on the porch. She sat there, rocking in her rocking chair, sipping her tea, thinking how glad she was that she had done this awful thing. After a while, she heard this old, empty voice out in the distance, moaning and groaning, and it was saying, "Who's going to stay with me this cold and lonely night? Who?"
It's him,
she thought, and she hollered back.
"Stay by yourself, you old goat."
Soon she heard the voice again, only now it was closer, and it was saying, "Who's going to sit with me this cold and lonely night? Who?"
"Only a crazy man.
she shouted.
Sit by yourself, you dirty rat."
Then she heard the voice even closer, and it was saying, "Who's going to be with me this cold and lonely night? Who?"
"Nobody.
she sneered.
Be by yourself, you miserable mole."
She stood up to go into the house, but now the voice was right behind her, and it was whispering, "Who's going to stay with me this cold and lonely night?" Before she could answer back, a big hairy hand came around the corner and grabbed her, and the voice hollered, "You are